Jaguar's E-Pace gives buyers another very interesting option in the growing segment for premium badged compact SUVs. It's a crucial car for the company, but is it the right one? There's a lot riding on this little crossover.
Did you ever think that Jaguar would become a brand with sales based mainly around SUVs? Well, it is today. The company's mid-sized F-Pace model introduced the crossover community to the concept of a Jag, but it's this smaller E-Pace that's now this manufacturer's best seller. And the name suggests an electric connection, misleading as it turns out. Jaguar does have another SUV, the battery-powered I-Pace, to provide that. Both the cars that the company decided it needed, but found it didn't have the capacity to build. Hence the need for an agreement with Magna Steyr in Austria, who've been making G-Class models for Mercedes since 1979, and who will build all the E-Pace variants destined for our market. The car targets the premium part of the SUV-C segment. That's the compact part of the crossover market, aimed at people who need something Qashqai or Attica size but want a posher badge on the bonnet. The Jaguar Land Rover business already has a car competing here, the Range Rover Evoque, and presumably in order to simplify the design process, they've based the E-Pace on most of the same engineering used in that model. Shared mechanicals include the 9-speed automatic gearbox and the Haldex four-wheel drive system that are used in most variants of this Jaguar, plus Ingenium 4-cylinder diesel power and a hefty steel chassis that, rather confusingly, makes this car heavier than its larger but aluminium-orientated F-Pace showroom stablemate. What potential buyers will care more about, though, is the idea of Jaguar sports car design and dynamics being available in a 5-seat compact performance SUV. Now that's enticing, and it explains why over 80% of E-Pace prospects will be customers new to the brand. What will they find when they get to grips with the big cat's cute little cub, though? Let's find out. So what might the Jaguar of premium compact SUVs be like? Well, the company has established a reputation for engineering cars with a uniquely fluid combination of ride and handling, and this market segment certainly needs that. The established contenders, so BMW's X1, Mercedes GLA and Audi's Q3, offer a resolutely unremarkable handling confection, but more recent ones have at least tried to be more dynamically distinctive. Some ride quite well, but offer a little cornering finesse. Step forward Volvo's XC40. Others turn sweetly, but they bump you about over brittle surfaces, and that's the experience offered up by the BMW X2. The stage is perfectly set then for this E-Pace to continue in its brand's tradition of being able to offer an almost ideal compromise between these two extremes, and to do so with a bit of driver involvement. That would have been a lot easier to do had this car been engineered from the ground up as a Jaguar, as its larger F-Pace SUV stablemate was. Hard economics, though, have decreed that most of what matters beneath this E-Pace model's flowing bodywork, so the platform, the engine, the transmission and so on, should be borrowed from the two most compact models sold by sister brand Land Rover, the Range Rover Evoque and the Land Rover Discovery Sport. Now, taking that kind of mechanical package and giving it a Jaguar feel was always going to be difficult, but not quite impossible. Jaguar's engineers were able to add in a more rigid front subframe to crispen up the steering response, to give the most powerful models an active rear axle that's able to distribute torque between the two rear wheels and offer E-Pace buyers the option of their Adaptive Dynamics variable damping system. That last feature is important. The Coventry development team weren't able to change this car's pretty conventional borrowed suspension setup much. There are McPherson struts at the front and a multi-link rear, so it's not surprising that the standard model's rather over-firm ride lacks the Jaguar fluidity that we were hoping for. Paying extra for the Adaptive Dynamics package should help a lot here. Now, this monitors body movements 100 times a second and wheel movements 500 times a second, so the car's suspension can always automatically be precisely configured for the road you're on and the mood you're in. On all-wheel drive automatic models, there's also the option of Jaguar's configurable dynamics package, and that allows you to add in your own personal settings for throttle mapping, gear shift changes, steering feel, and if it's fitted, the adaptive dynamics dampers. This kind of thing makes this Jaguar's claim to be the sports car of its class sound a little more credible. Regardless of whether or not you choose the adaptive dampers, your E-Pace will still come with the selectable driving modes that they operate through. That's known as Jaguar Drive Control. It's one of those setups that allows you to alter the throttle response, the steering feel, and on an automatic model like this one, the auto gear shift change timings. That's dependent on the way that you want to drive. Simply make your choice between the various modes provided by this rather awkward feeling toggle switch down here by the gear selector. Comfort and Eco, they're fairly self-explanatory, while Dynamic sharpens the car up nicely. There's also an extra rain, ice, snow option that on the automatic four-wheel drive models activates all surface progress control. And that's a low-speed cruise control that helps to maintain progress and avoid wheel spin on low traction surfaces. We should talk about engines. Jaguar's made good use of the Ingenium 2-litre petrol and diesel 4-cylinder units produced for all the most recent JLR Group models, but this is the first car that the brand has launched that uses them exclusively. And despite all the doom and gloom currently diminishing diesel sales at present, the company still thinks that 90% of E-Pace buyers will want to fuel from the black pump. Virtually all of them will be likely to be selecting between the D150 and the D180 units that prop up the range. The D150 variant is your only option if you want front-wheel drive. Otherwise, we really can't see why you'd bother with it, given that the pokier D180 version is just as economical and costs very little more. Ignore the D150 and you'll find that all the other E-Pace models come only with 4x4 traction. Now, both the base diesel variants get a manual gearbox option that very few will take up, actually. But other than that, all the other E-Paces are automatic too. Based on that typical all-wheel drive automatic combination, a D150 takes 9.9 seconds to get from rest to 60 miles an hour on the way to 120 mph, while the equivalent D180 variant improves those figures to 8.7 seconds and 127 miles an hour. Is it worth considering the other more powerful auto all-wheel drive models elsewhere in the E-Pace range? Well, very few buyers will. There is a further quicker diesel option, the D240, which uses twin turbos to power you to 60 in 7 seconds dead, and it reaches 139 miles an hour flat out. Other than that, it's a case of selecting between the pair of 2-litre petrol derivatives, and they suffer in efficiency terms not only compared to the diesels, but also to obvious segment petrol rivals. Still, in compensation, they are usefully rapid. The base P250 makes 60 miles an hour in 6.6 seconds en route to 143, and the top P300 variant that we're trying here borrows its engine from the sweetest version of Jaguar's F-Type sports car, and it makes good use of it too. It improves those figures to 5.9 seconds and 151 miles an hour. Whatever your choice of unit beneath the bonnet, though, Progress never feels quite as energetic as you might hope it would from a small Jaguar pushed along by reasonable levels of power. And despite the inclusion of torque vectoring to maximise turning traction, the cornering agility that we rather enjoyed on the larger F-Pace isn't much in evidence either. Now, we'd guess that this model's prodigious 1.8-tonne curb weight, blame the Land Rover-derived steel platform that we referenced earlier for that, has a lot to do with both issues. The 9-speed auto gearbox also lacks the responsiveness of the 8-speed auto that's found in other Jags, and it doesn't come with paddle shifters unless you pay extra for the optional R-Dynamic package. The things that the engineers were able to influence, though, show just how much could have been achieved. The steering, for example, is usually such a failing in cars of this kind. It's the nicest we've tried in any sort of compact SUV. It's crisp, responsive and confidence-inspiring, and it wakes up nicely at speed. And the active driveline four-wheel drive setup that you get on the top D240 and P300 models gives a satisfying sense of propulsion if you exit a corner with a bit of commitment. The system's active rear axle able to instantly direct up to 100% of the available power to either rear wheel. There is body roll, but it's not excessive for a car in this class. We were impressed with refinement too. This petrol variant we'd expected to be quiet, but the rumble from the Ingenium diesel units has also been better kept in check in an E-Pace than is the case where that engine's been used in other JLR models. As a result, this Jaguar is the car in this class that we'd probably choose first if we had a long highway trip to complete. Can the E-Pace function off-road though? Does it matter? Well, as one writer recently pointed out, the sort of people expected to buy this car are the kind of folk who are likely to think that a trip to the wilds is somewhere more than 15 miles from the nearest Waitrose. So it won't bother these people unduly that this Jaguar lacks the terrain response system that this model's Land Rover design stablemates use to adapt to off-road surfaces, nor will it concern them very much that the off-road angles achievable in this model are some way short of what's possible in, say, the Evoque. For reference, the E-Pace offers an approach angle of 22.8 degrees, a departure angle of 29.4 degrees, and a ramp breakover angle of 21.1 degrees. Now, despite that, the reasonable 204mm ride height means you could probably get a surprisingly long way in this car on muddy tracks, providing the right tyres were fitted. A wading depth of up to 500mm, and that's the same as the Evoque, is also possible. The standard Land Rover-derived four-wheel drive driveline that most models use is also well up to mildly adventurous excursions. It's able to send almost all the engine's power to the rear wheels if those at the front lose traction. Various electronic systems further help things here. Hill Launch Assist stops the car from rolling backwards as you pull away on a steep incline, and automatic models come fitted with the all-surface progress control feature that we referenced earlier. There's also a low-friction launch option you can select from the Touch Pro touchscreen that regulates the throttle to restrict wheel spin as you pull away. Now, that'll be particularly useful for towers. All-wheel drive versions of this car can pull up to 1.8 tonnes. So yes, this is in most regards a proper SUV. Whether it's also a proper Jaguar will depend on your definition of brand values, but those are changing, and cars like this one are the reason why. Whereas rival brands merely shrink larger models to create more compact SUVs, Jaguar has opted to create something quite different with the E-Pace. Now this, according to the Coventry company, is the sports car of its class. It certainly has much more of a purposeful look than most of its rivals, and that's thanks to what the designers claim is inspiration borrowed from the F-Type sports car. That isn't particularly evident at first glance, but if you know that car and then you look a little closer at this one, you'll begin to pick up F-Type cues in the headlights, in the muscular rear haunches, and in the teardrop graphic of the rear side windows. Which is appropriate because although by and large buyers of compact SUVs aren't especially bothered if their cars don't drive in a particularly sporting manner, they do like them to look sporty, as this one certainly does here at the front thanks to acres of honeycombed plastic. Now, that features in these large corner cutouts and across this lower intake, but it's predictably most prominent here on the grille, which features 3D chamfering detail and Jaguar's biggest ever growler badge here at the centre. Buyers get a choice of two variations on the same body style, either a standard model or the optional R Dynamic package, which has been fitted in this case. That's identifiable here at the front by a more purposeful front bumper and the gloss black finish for this main grille. Whatever your preference, full LED headlights featuring crystal-like lenses and distinctive J-Blade daytime running light strips come as standard, and they can, as here, optionally incorporate high-tech matrix technology, and that adapts their beam to road conditions and other motorists. Move to the side, and if you happen to be familiar with Jaguar's mid-sized F-Pace SUV, the reduction in size of this E-Pace will be particularly obvious. Jaguar insiders call it the Cub, hence the cute graphics that feature in the puddle lamps and in the windscreen surround, and a 320mm length reduction over the model. Now you might notice that the front overhang here is slightly longer than that at the rear. The idea is to give the car a sense of visual movement, even when it's standing still. Now that is one trademark of Jaguar design. Another lies with this side fender vent just here above the front wheel arch. The fuselage-like profile of the body sides is also supposed to echo that found in some of the brand's more dynamic designs, and that's something the designers have tried to emphasize with these sharp mid-level creases. A further character line lower down gives the flanks some shape, and that separates wheel arches, able to house some of the largest rims in the segment. The E-Pace is the first car in its class to offer the option of 21-inch wheels. We've got the 20 inches here though. Roof rails and a black contrast coloured roof are both options that you may want to consider. Approach from the rear and you'll find the taut surfaces and the muscular haunches fusing with the sharp lines of the LED light clusters, and these incorporate race circuit chicane illuminated graphic. These twin exhausts come as part of the R dynamic package, and they feature round finishes that are inspired by jet engine tailpipes. This large upper tailgate spoiler, meanwhile, is a three-piece design, and that's specially tuned for optimum airflow. It's all very different from this model's F-Pace stablemate, as is the chassis that lies beneath this. In place of the sophisticated aluminium structure of that larger SUV, the E-Pace uses the older steel-based platform that's found in compact Land Rover models like the Range Rover Evoque and the Discovery Sport. Now, to compensate, aluminium features in many of the body panels, in the roof, in the wings, the bonnet and the tailgate, but that isn't enough to keep the weight of this little cub in check. Around 1.8 tonnes is pretty heavy for a car of this class. That's enough, in fact, to make this E-Pace significantly heavier than its larger showroom stablemate. In D180 four-wheel drive auto guise, an E-Pace is 68 kilos heavier than an F-Pace with the same drivetrain. Let's take a seat up front. Now, if you didn't pick up the visual F-Type sports car references outside, you may more readily notice those once you're seated in the so-called Sports Command driving position. Now, as in the F-Pace, Jaguar has provided the slightly raised seating stance that SUV buyers like, while still allowing you to feel an involved component to the driving experience. Now, achieving that balance was pretty essential if the F-Type carryovers weren't going to look somewhat incongruous. Now, these include this passenger grab handle that forms the boundary of the centre console, and also this upright sports shift gear lever. Now, fortunately, the F-Pace model's awkward rotary gear selector has been dispensed with for this smaller SUV. The three-spoke steering wheel is F-Type derived too, as are the analogue instrument binnacle dials that most models provide beyond that. Now, we haven't got those here because this particular model is one of those that's been fitted out with a 12.3-inch virtual instrument display that we first saw on Jaguar's XJ Saloon. Now, this setup allows you to customise the way that driving information is displayed. In fact, the whole screen can display 3D sat-nav mapping if you decide you don't want dials at all. Not that you'll be looking at all this very much if your E-Pace features the head-up display that Jaguar says it's further perfected with high-resolution TFT technology for this model. Anything the instrument binnacle area can't tell you will, of course, be covered off by the centre dash screen. E-Pace buyers get as standard the larger 10-inch Touch Pro monitor that F-Pace customers have to pay extra for. Unfortunately, though, this can't be operated with the kind of iDrive-style rotary infotainment controller that direct German SUV rivals offer. That means that the commands that you can't input by the steering wheel buttons have to be submitted by the often inexact process of voice control. That's if you don't want to end up stabbing away at the touchscreen and covering it with fingerprints. That is assuming that you can see the touchscreen, and it can be frustratingly difficult to read in bright sunlight. To be fair, the system's screen and voice functionality do generally work well, and the Touch Pro setup's general layout and ease of use would be difficult to better. It includes the pinch, swipe and zoom screen functionality that you'll be used to using on a typical tablet. This monitor is your access point not only to the expected audio, climate, telephone and navigation functions, but also to in-car Wi-Fi and a whole suite of in-control connected car technologies. That includes an in-control apps feature, and that'll allow you to select from a whole series of downloadable compatible applications. Now that's just as well because, rather unfathomably, Jaguar Land Rover doesn't offer Apple CarPlay or Android Auto smartphone mirroring access in any of its models. The navigation system is very clever though. There's a commute mode, and that learns your daily drive so it can automatically offer alternative routes based on real-time traffic information. And arrival mode shows a 360-degree interactive view of your destination when you're 200 metres away from it, as well as suggesting the nearest available parking spaces. And a Share ETA function also enables you to notify selected contacts of your arrival time by SMS or email. Plenty of thought's gone into cabin finishing too. The sports style seats that feature on the R Dynamic models get unique shoulder profiles and deeper bolsters. The rotary dials at the centre of the lower dashboard, those are apparently inspired by the precise control of a classic Leica camera lens. There are touch-sensitive overhead lights. Even the mat at the base of the stowage box beneath the armrest here between the front seats is E-Pace bespoke with its Jaguar fur motif. Now this is a flexible storage area that can be up to 8.42 litres in size if you take away this lift-out double cup holder section at the front. That capacity is enough to swallow a couple of 1 litre drinks bottles laid flat. Plus you also get 12-volt and HDMI ports, as well as a couple of USB sockets. Other storage solutions include a big 10-litre glove box. Plus, in front of the gear lever, you'll find a further smaller stowage area, and that has another 12-volt socket. Thoughtfully designed slots in the spacious door pockets can take 500 millilitre bottles. The cabin ergonomics are generally pretty good, although the starter button is rather obscured by the indicator stalk, and rearward visibility is somewhat compromised by the C-pillar styling and the rake-back rear screen. Now that is something that Jaguar is clearly aware of, hence their decision to equip all models with a rear-view camera and all-round parking sensors. If you avoid entry-level trim, you'll get this 360-degree camera system too. The steering wheel gear shift paddles won't come as standard unless you stump up for the R Dynamic package. As for cabin quality and general trimming, well, it can seem a bit sparse and stripped out further down the range. If, though, you can stretch to a plusher variant like this one, it's predictably very nice indeed. Options like this softer Windsor leather upholstery and blue contrast stitching give this cabin a suitably premium feel. Right, time to take a seat in the rear. Now this swept-back roofline suggests that headroom back here might be something of a premium. But in the event, rear seat headroom's actually quite good, even if your E-Pace features the optional panoramic glass roof that we've got here. Now that lets in some much needed light, as do these neat little rear C-pillar mini windows. The cabin is going to feel pretty cramped if you have to fit in a third occupant, but of course that is pretty normal for this segment. It's a pity though that you can't have the sliding and reclining rear bench that's available in the rival BMW X1. A centre armrest folds down to reveal twin cup holders and an integrated storage tray. Plus there are decently sized door pockets, nets on the seat backs and twin centre vents with a small storage area just beneath that. There's a 12-volt socket too, although you can swap that for a trio of USB sockets if you have kids who are addicted to gaming. Now let's have a look at the boot, and that's accessed on plusher models via this powered tailgate. This can be specified to rise with a wave of your foot beneath the bumper if you approach the car key-in pocket, laden down with bags. Now the hatch rises to reveal one of the largest luggage compartments in the compact SUV segment, offering a 577-litre capacity, and that can easily swallow a folded buggy, a full set of golf clubs sideways, or 6 flight suitcases. Under the floor, there's a further 93-litre compartment, although you only get that if, rather unwisely, you've chosen not to pay extra for a space-saver spare wheel. This cargo area is very usably shaped too. There are 4 chromed tie-down hooks in the floor, and you'll be able to use those to keep smaller items in place if you've ordered one of the optional luggage nets. Jaguar hasn't forgotten to add in a 12-volt socket, and there are further practical touches. These include bag hooks on both cargo sidewalls, plus on the right-hand side there's a netted area and elasticated strap. Now the rear bench can't be had here with either a ski hatch or the useful 40-20-40 split that you'll find on the F-Pace, but it does fold almost flat in a 60-40 split, and that'll give you 1,234 litres of total capacity. Now that is a little less than you'll find with obvious rivals, but with 1,568 millimetres of loading length on offer, you should still have plenty of luggage capacity options. E-Pace pricing starts from just under £30,000, and most models will be sold in the £33,000 to £37,000 bracket, so you're looking at figures that are pretty par for the course in this segment. Variants at the upper end of the range though, cars like the one we're testing here today, are priced right up towards £50,000, and that is really pushing the boundaries for an SUV of this size, even a very upmarket one. There are 2 E-Pace style formats to choose from. There's a standard one and the more sporting R-Dynamic look that we have here. Now, once you've decided between those 2, you can then match it to one of the 4 trim levels: Standard, S, SE or Top HSE, which is the one we're trying today. Next, there's a question of engine choice, and that will determine your drivetrain and transmission layout. Now, virtually all buyers will want one of the diesel variants, and almost all of these will be choosing between the base D150 and the mid-range D180 models. The entry-level D150 comes in its cheapest form with front-wheel drive and a 6-speed manual gearbox, but if you're prepared to pay a little more for 4-wheel drive, then you'll get the choice of either manual or automatic transmission. The 4x4 setup is worth having, and if you get it mated with automatic transmission, there's the benefit of 2 additional clever features. All-surface progress control is a kind of low-speed cruise control that helps you to maintain optimum control in low traction conditions. If you're inching across challenging terrain, you can just set it and let the car take over. There's also a low friction launch feature, and that works when you're starting off on really slippery surfaces, and it activates a special throttle map that helps you to pull away without wheel spin. So let's assume that you do want all-wheel traction in a volume E-Pace diesel model. Now, if that's the case, then you probably won't want to stick with the base D150 derivative, given that Jaguar asks only £750 more to upgrade to a perkier mid-range D180 model that only comes in 4-wheel drive form but offers manual or auto options. Of course, there's always a chance that you're one of those people who've been put off black pump fuel by all the scaremongering in the media. Now, if that's the case, then you might also want to consider the alternative mainstream engine variant, the P250 petrol version. That is only available in 4-wheel drive auto guise. Maybe, though, you have the funds and the desire for a more performance-orientated E-Pace model. If so, 2 top engine options are available to you, both, as you might expect, being auto-only and both priced at well over £40,000. There's a top diesel, the D240, or if you're prepared to avoid lower levels of trim, you could opt for the quickest P300 petrol version that we've been trying here, and that borrows its engine from base versions of Jaguar's F-Type sports car. Both the D240 and the P300 get a more sophisticated 4-wheel drive system to help transmit their more prodigious levels of torque to the tarmac. That's an active drive line that delivers more of a rear-driven feel, and it's capable of varying power delivery between the 2 rear wheels through the bends. Having analysed this car's range structure, let's now look at how it slots into the Jaguar model lineup. Now, the drive package that most customers will want, with all-wheel drive, automatic transmission and the D180 diesel engine, costs from around £33,000 in e-Pace form. If you get the same setup in the company's XC Saloon, and you'd need from around £38,000. Get it with the brand's larger mid-sized SUV, the F-Pace, and you'll need from around £39,000. Of greater interest to likely buyers, though, will be the way that this car has been priced against directly comparable models from competitor brands in the premium part of the SUV C segment that it's been designed to compete in. So let's see. The E-Pace was launched primarily to take on 5 sector rivals that its Range Rover Evoque design stablemate wasn't targeting as directly as the Jaguar Land Rover Group would have liked. Audi's Q3, the Mercedes GLA, Volvo's XC40 and BMW's X1 and X2 models. Now, as you'd expect, this car is very comparably priced to equivalent versions of all those contenders. Inevitably, though, there are a few minor price differences depending on the competitor model you're looking at and the variant that you're considering. So let's talk you through those now. An entry-level diesel Mercedes GLA 200D will cost a fraction less than its E-Pace D150 equivalent, but add in four-wheel drive to the equation and the equivalent will cost you a couple of thousand more. If, on the other hand, you're directly comparing against volume variants of equivalent Audi Q3, BMW X1 or X2 models, then this Jag should give you a £500 to £1,500 saving. Should you instead be tempted by the trendy look of Volvo's XC40, well, you'll find that volume versions of that car are very closely price matched to comparable E-Pace variants, but the handling of that Swedish SUV isn't quite as responsive as what's on offer here, if that matters to you. What else? Well, interestingly, Jaguar has decided that this E-Pace should undercut its mechanically almost identical manufacturing group Range Rover Evoque stablemate, and that's by a couple of £1,000. So it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out in terms of sales figures. Getting away from such specifics, if you want a quick, direct competitor overview, let's give it to you. All the key class rivals I just mentioned can slightly improve on this Jaguar's fuel and CO2 returns, but the E-Pace makes up ground with unbettered residual values and a class-leadingly large boot. Plus, in this segment, only BMW's X2 is better to drive, and that car doesn't ride as well as this one. So, there you have it in a nutshell. Your only other choices in this premium part of the segment lie with lesser-known brands. There's the Lexus UX and the DS7 Crossback. They're both trendy but not very sporty. And the Infiniti QX30, which is neither trendy nor sporty. Those then are the direct premium branded segment rivals. In theory, there are other similarly sized sporty compact SUV options, but they're all from more mainstream makers that typical Jaguar buyers tend not to consider. So cars, for example, like ritzier versions of the Volkswagen T-Roc, maybe even a top-spec Toyota CHR. Of course, if you don't need your compact C-segment SUV to be either premium badged or particularly sporty, you get a much wider range of potential choices. Most of the crossovers in question are slightly larger too. So, for much the same sort of money as Jaguar's asking here, you'd get, say, a ritzy, leather-lined Ford Kuga Vignale, or a generously specified version of a model like Toyota's RAV4, Honda CR-V, and Volkswagen's Tiguan. None of these products, though, are as fashionable or as dynamic as an E-Pace, nor will they hold their value as strongly. If, having considered all of this, you conclude it is this Jaguar that you really want, then you're going to need to know exactly what's included in the standard specification. Well, there's plenty, and that's even if you opt for entry-level trim. A number of features that rival brands would charge you extra for are things like LED headlamps, an extra-large 10-inch centre dash infotainment screen, a rear-view camera, and a heated windscreen. They're all standard right across the range here. Plus, you get alloy wheels of at least 17 inches in size, two-zone climate control, all-round parking sensors, auto headlamps and wipers, LED rear lights, an alarm and cruise control with a speed limiter. There are plenty of standard dynamic driving aids too. So on the move, you'll benefit from the Jaguar drive control system, and that, via various settings, allows you to tweak the steering and the throttle response to suit the way that you want to drive. And there's gear change timings too, if, like most buyers, you've opted for automatic transmission. Cornering traction is aided by a torque vectoring setup. Inside the cabin, the 10-inch Touch Pro infotainment screen we just mentioned includes voice control, a 125-watt Jaguar sound system, a DAB tuner, Bluetooth for your phone and USB connectivity, although not, unfortunately, access to the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring systems. It's a bit of a major omission in this day and age. You do, though, get Jaguar's useful in-control remote package, which provides information on your vehicle and allows you to interact remotely with it. Now, this service includes optimized assistance, and that transmits your location and diagnostic data in the event of a breakdown, and SOS emergency call. Now, I'm going to come back to that later. The Jaguar in-control remote app also lets you check fuel levels remotely and uses a beep and flash function to help you find your Jag in a packed parking area. All this is included whatever e-Pace variant you decide on. Before getting into what's on offer with different trim specs, though, you might remember that at the beginning of this section, we mentioned that right across the range, there are two style formats to choose from, the standard one and the more sporting R-Dynamic look that we have here. Now, you get this with an R-Dynamic pack, and that costs £2,250 more on top of the cost of whatever trim and engine package you end up deciding on. We think a very large proportion of buyers are going to want this because it gives this car a much more purposeful look and feel. Specifically, the pack includes an R-Dynamic body kit incorporating a unique front bumper and a smarter front grille with a gloss black finish and a satin chrome surround. Plus, there are satin chromed side vents, body coloured door claddings, front fog lights and twin tailpipes with finishers. Inside, the R-Dynamic package gets you sports seats with contrast stitching, bright metal pedals, branded door sill tread plates and a sportier leather steering wheel. Now, that wheel would come with satin black gear shift paddles if you've opted for an auto variant. So let's say you've chosen your engine, you've deliberated between the standard and R-Dynamic body finishes before finally deciding that you want your e-Pace to be a little more luxuriously equipped than is possible with standard trim. So the next step up the trim hierarchy lies with S specification, and that gives you larger 18-inch 9-spoke wheels, leather upholstery, 10-way electrically adjustable front seats, an auto-dimming rear-view mirror, a signature daytime running lamp headlight graphic, and a park pack including a 360-degree parking camera and a park assist system to steer you into spaces. Even more importantly, S-Spec gets you a significant infotainment upgrade. So from this level in the range upwards, the Centre Dash Touch Pro monitor comes with in-control touch navigation. It can create in the car a 4G Wi-Fi hotspot for up to 8 devices, and it includes a smartphone pack, and that features Jaguar's in-control apps technology. This allows vehicle-optimized apps to be controlled through the touchscreen, including your contacts, your calendar and music player. You can also download a range of third-party apps offering a vast range of services. Want more? Then mid-range SE spec could suit. Here, the wheels are of the 19-inch 10-spoke variety. The front seats get wider 14-way adjustment, and the audio system gets a 380-watt Meridian upgrade. Plus, there's a powered tailgate and an extra package of camera-driven safety features that we'll cover off in a minute. Now, you might think that that doesn't leave much for this particular model's top-spec HSE trim to add. You'd be wrong there. At the top of the range, you'll be treated to 20-inch wheels, softer perforated Windsor leather for the upholstery, 18-way powered front seats, keyless entry and a tailgate that opens with a wave of your foot beneath the bumper. Plus, the analogue instrument dials will be replaced with a digital screen, Jaguar's 12.3-inch interactive driver display. On to options, and as you might expect from a premium brand, there's a vast selection of extras for potential buyers to choose from. So let's start with the driving stuff and the Adaptive Dynamics variable damping system, and that makes a big difference when it comes to controlling the suspension feel of this rather firm riding car. In fact, we go as far as to suggest that the adaptive dynamics option is pretty essential if you want an e-Pace fitted with one of the larger wheel sizes. This setup uses sensors that analyse body movement 100 times a second and wheel movement 500 times a second, ensuring that the suspension should always be perfectly suited to the way that you want to drive. Now, it works through the various modes of the Jaguar drive control system we mentioned earlier, and it can, at extra cost, be embellished with a further configurable dynamic mode. Now, that allows you to set up specific personal preferences with regard to throttle, steering and suspension feel. And beyond that, well, if we were buying, there are a few things we might want to put aside a little extra budget for. Now, bear in mind that a Space Saver spare wheel costs extra, so you need to budget for that if, in the event of a puncture, you don't want to be stuck by the side of the road with one of those irritating tyre inflation kits. Carpet mats cost extra too. Most e-Pace buyers pay extra for roof rails, and they're available in silver or gloss black. And a head-up display that projects key information up into your line of sight. That would be nice to have. As would this top HSE model's interactive driver display digital instrument binnacle. With the lower order models, you might well want keyless entry and a powered tailgate too. Another optional feature that we'd really like would be the activity key. Now, this is a waterproof, shockproof wristband with an integrated transponder. Now, when wearing it, you can lock your key in the car, remove the anxiety of losing it, and when you return from rock climbing or canoeing or biking or whatever, all you do is hold the wristband near to the J of the Jaguar letting on the boot, and it opens the tailgate so you can access the ordinary key fob where it'll be safely stowed away. The activity key doesn't have a battery, so it'll never run out of power. Organising your media connectivity and in-car entertainment options will also be an important part of the e-Pace specification process. Remember that the base standard trim model doesn't come with navigation. Plus, at that level in the range, you also have to pay more for Jaguar's Connect Pro pack. That gives you in-car Wi-Fi, and also the smartphone pack that gives you access to various apps. On a standard or an S-spec e-Pace model, we'd also suggest that you pay the extra for the more powerful 380-watt Meridian stereo. The standard 125-watt setup is a bit feeble. There is an even more desirable 825-watt Meridian surround sound setup available if you want it. Plus, if funds permit, you could also add in a digital TV receiver. Possibly our favourite entertainment option, though, lies in the way that you can add clever dual view functionality to the centre dash screen, and that lets driver and front seat passenger use the same monitor to watch different things from different angles. So, for example, if you're driving, you could view sat-nav mapping while your partner watches a DVD. What else? Well, this particular car features a number of nice-to-have features: a fixed panoramic glass sunroof, surround camera system, rear privacy glass, a heated steering wheel, front seats with memory settings and configurable ambient interior lighting. Plus, it's got clever matrix LED headlights that adapt sections of their beam to ambient conditions and other road users. As a buyer, we could have gone further and added in cabin air ionisation with an air quality sensor, a secure tracker system and an infrared reflective windscreen. In addition, there's a range of seat functionality upgrade packages on offer, including various levels of powered adjustment and heating, which in some cases even extends to the upholstery at the rear. Onto aesthetics. Now, wheel rim sizes tend to be key for e-Pace buyers, so there's a wider than usual range of different alloy designs on offer in sizes from 17 to 21 inches. This particular car's 20-inch 5 split-spoke satin grey diamond-toned rims are particularly nice. Whatever your rim choice, you can add in the lovely red brake calipers we've got here, and don't forget to add in locking wheel nuts. Onto paintwork. Now, bear in mind that unless you want your car finished in solid Fuji white, you'll have to pay extra for one of the metallic finishes. There are 7 shades on offer, and that includes this car's Firenze Red, plus further premium metallic hues of Farrell and Pearl Black and Silicon Silver. Avoid either of the black shades on offer, and you can add in a black contrast roof at further extra cost. As for finishing touches for the exterior, well, chromed side window surrounds are available. Plus, you might want to add in this top HSE model's twin tailpipes with finishes. The mirror covers and the side vents can be finished in gloss black or carbon fibre. And there's an extra chromed finish for the mirrors too. A stainless steel undershield is available. And if you'd like to emphasise the SUV look, you can add in side steps and bright side tubes. This particular car also has the optional black pack, and that adds meaner looking black finishing to certain exterior elements. Now, you're probably going to want to get the interior of your E-Pace finished to your exact preferences too. Depending on the trim level you select, there are a range of differently finished leather upholstery options. Now, this particular test car, for example, features Eclipse Windsor leather sport seats with Reims blue contrast stitching and an ebony Eclipse interior. And the roof lining can be upgraded with this particular model's ebony Mortzine headliner or with gorgeous ebony suede cloth. If you have gone for an auto model and you've decided against the R dynamic body finishing package that we were talking about earlier, do bear in mind that you won't get steering wheel gear shift paddles. Now, these can be had in aluminium or aluminium red finishes as an extra option. And finally, illuminated metal front tread plates and an illuminated luggage compartment finisher could well provide the finishing touch. On to practicalities. Now, you can make better use of the boot space by adding in our partition net, a floor net or load space storage rails. Both detachable and electrically deployable tow bars are available, and all-season tyres might be useful. There are roof rails and roof crossbars that will enable the fitment of carriers for surfboards, skis, snowboards or luggage boxes, and sunshades are available for the rear and side windows. We'd also be tempted by the rear centre armrest cooler warmer box. On to safety, where, as you'd expect, most of the main bases are covered. Now, Jaguar hasn't bothered with offering a driver's knee bag, but twin front, side and curtain airbags are inevitably standard. Plus, all models get a unique-in-class pedestrian airbag, which springs out from beneath the windscreen edge of the deployable bonnet in the event of an impact. And that protects pedestrians or cyclists from contact with the glass. More expected passive safety features include Isofix rear child seat fastenings, anti-whiplash head restraints, tyre pressure monitoring and the usual electronic assistance for traction and stability control. As usual, there's ABS braking with emergency brake assist, and that helps in panic stops, and those are advertised to following motorists by automatically activating hazard flashes. What else? Well, all E-Pace occupants are surrounded by a high-strength steel safety cell, and the reactions of the person in charge at the wheel will constantly be overseen by a standard driver condition monitor, and that's there to search for signs of drowsiness. As for driving aids, well, Hill Start Assist stops the car from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. There's engine drag torque control to reduce the chance of the kind of wheel lockup that might be caused by strong engine braking in slippery conditions. Cornering brake control varies braking force to each wheel to avoid unsettling the car too much if you're unwise enough to brake at speed in the middle of a corner. And roll stability control is integrated into the standard dynamic stability control system to reduce the possibility of a rollover during extreme turns at speed. Plus, if you've fitted a tow bar, you'll benefit from trailer stability assist, and that mitigates against trailer sway. All well and good, but what about the kind of clever camera-driven safety features that increasingly appear in all this model's main rivals? Well, of course, the E-Pace has these too. Fitted as standard across the range is an AEB, autonomous emergency braking system, and it scans the road ahead as you drive in search of potential collision hazards, whether they be vehicles or pedestrians. If such a thing's detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond, or perhaps you're unable to, then braking will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. In addition, all E-Pace models get a lane keep assist system that'll alert dozy drivers if they're veering out of their lanes on the highway. Plus, we particularly approve of the optimised assistance SOS emergency call feature, and that's built into the standard in-control remote package. Now that transmits your location and diagnostic data to the emergency services in the event of an accident. Well, it could be a lifesaver. Avoid entry-level trim and your E-Pace will come with 2 further camera-driven safety features: traffic sign recognition, pictures key road signs as you pass them and then displays them on the dash, and a rear traffic monitor warns you of oncoming vehicles when you're reversing blindly out of a parking space. Auto high beam assist for the headlamps is optional on the lower spec models too, and if you specify the optional 360-degree surround view camera, you'll also get an incorporated forward traffic monitor system that warns of approaching vehicles at junctions where visibility is restricted. The plusher SE and HSE variants get a drive pack. Now that's optional lower down the range. This gives you 3 further features: a high-speed emergency braking system, a blind spot assist setup, and that works on the move to stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake in front of another driver, and an adaptive cruise control with Q Assist package. Now the Q Assist element of this is a feature that you can set in a traffic jam so that the car can handle irritating very low speed stop-start motoring without driver intervention. Find it difficult to get your head around the fact that an E-Pace SUV is significantly heavier than Jaguar's larger F-Pace model? Well, it does sound odd, doesn't it? If you were able to look beneath the skin of this car, though, that apparent anomaly would be easier to understand. And whereas an F-Pace gets a sophisticated aluminium skeleton, this E-Pace has to make do with an old-tech steel chassis that's shared with the Range Rover Evoque and the Land Rover Discovery Sport. That's a structure that's hardly in the first flush of youth. It was used by the old Land Rover Freelander 2, and that was a vehicle launched all the way back in 2006. Jaguar's designers have done their best to compensate for this by using aluminium for the bonnet, the roof panel, the tailgate and the wings, plus magnesium features in the dashboard crossmember. Unfortunately, though, those efforts haven't been enough to prevent curb weight from being a subject that the brand prefers not to mention when discussion turns to this car. The E-Pace may in theory be the company's most compact model, but it still tips the scales at a hefty 1.8 tonnes, and on average it's 85 kilos, the weight of a podgy passenger, heavier than its mid-sized F-Pace showroom stablemate, a car that's 320mm longer, 36mm wider and 18mm taller. Now, having heard that, you won't be surprised to hear that an E-Pace is also quite a bit heavier than its C-segment premium SUV rivals. The D180 all-wheel drive model that most will choose tips the scales at 1,831 kilos. That's 156 kilos more than a comparable BMW X2 and a massive 236 kilos more than a comparable Mercedes GLA. Even the Volvo XC40, a model that struggles quite a bit with its weight, is nearly 100 kilos lighter, and so, quite interestingly, is a comparable Range Rover Evoque model with exactly the same engine, transmission and platform. Bearing all that in mind, this Jaguar actually does quite well to deliver the figures it does. Fortunately, the 2-litre Ingenium diesel engines that most buyers will choose are inherently pretty efficient, to the point where a D150 diesel version of this E-Pace is actually slightly cleaner and more frugal than its directly comparable Volvo XC40 D3 equivalent. And it gets to within 5 to 10% of the figures you'd get from a BMW X1 or an Audi Q3. A Mercedes GLA has a greater efficiency advantage, but that isn't as enjoyable to drive as this Jaguar, so as ever it comes down to what you want. So let's get to the figures. As you'd expect, the most efficient package is the front-driven D150 manual diesel variant, which on standard wheels manages up to 60.1 mpg on the combined cycle and up to 124 grams per kilometre of CO2. Add in four-wheel drive and those figures fall to 54.3 mpg and 137 grams per kilometre. Add in four-wheel drive and auto transmission and you're talking 50.4 mpg and 147 grams per kilometre. At least opting for the perkier D180 version of that engine makes no difference to the figures. To give you some perspective, if you were going to choose an F-Pace D180 all-wheel drive auto rather than an E-Pace D180 all-wheel drive auto, you'd go nearly 3 miles further on every gallon and put out 8 grams per kilometre less of CO2. If you ever wanted to know just how much difference 85 kilos of curb weight can make, well, you have it right there. Still, either way, you should have an operating range of over 600 miles. What about the other E-Pace variants? Well, finishing our perusal of the diesel figures, let's tell you that the D240 auto all-wheel drive flagship diesel version returns 45.6 mpg and 162 grams per kilometre of CO2. If you'd prefer to look at petrol power, then the P250 variant manages 36.7 mpg and 174 grams per kilometre, and the top P300 delivers 35.3 mpg and 181 grams per kilometre. All those figures we've quoted assume that you've chosen the most frugal of the 4 Jaguar drive control modes, Eco, for your trip, and that's a setting that, as the name suggests, adjusts all the car's systems for maximum efficiency. Beyond that, your driving is clearly going to play a crucial part in the efficiency process, and that's something this E-Pace's technology wants to help you improve. The Touch Pro infotainment screen's Eco Data section offers a driving style display to help here, showing you your recent efficiency success when it comes to 3 areas: accelerator, speed and engine, and brake. There's an advanced trip screen showing how your running cost figures stack up, and an impact on fuel display showing you how much the use of features like air conditioning is costing you in terms of consumption. What else? Well, you get the usual unremarkable 3-year warranty, although to be fair it does cover you for up to 100,000 miles. And service intervals are set at 21,000 miles or every 24 months, whichever comes first, although it would be sensible to consider one of Jaguar's service plans that cover you for virtually everything in advance. There's a standard mileage service plan that covers you for 5 years or 50,000 miles, or a high mileage service plan that covers you for 5 years and 75,000 miles. Both packages include engine oil and filters, checking and topping up brake fluid, and a 24-month guarantee on any replacement parts. Should anything go wrong, Europe-wide breakdown assistance is part of the deal for 3 years. Now let's look at insuring this Jaguar. The base D150 is rated at between 24E and 27E, depending on variant, while for the D180 it's between 29E and 32E. The D240 derivative is rated between groups 35E and 37E. The P250 petrol model, that's rated at between group 34E and 37E. And the P300 is either group 39 or 40E. As to depreciation, well, the news is almost universally positive here. A typical D180 all-wheel drive SE variant will still be worth close to 60% of its original purchase price after 3 years and 36,000 miles. No direct rival can get near to matching that. And as a result, despite its so-so efficiency showing, an F-Pace should still be very cost-effective to lease for company or private drivers, whether you choose Jaguar's own scheme or one of the many others on offer. The E-Pace is one of the most significant cars that Jaguar's ever made. The first to be manufactured outside the UK, the first to attack the volume part of the SUV market, and the car that will push the brand's global annual sales beyond the 250,000 mark for the first time. It's attracted a whole new generation of customers to the company's showrooms, and we can see why, combining as it does dynamic Jaguar body language with the fashionable practicality of a compact SUV. A significant car, though, isn't necessarily a great one. The relatively old steel chassis that Jaguar's used in order to get this car into the showrooms quickly and fill a gap in its marketing plan affects both agility and efficiency in equal measure. And it's responsible for something that we still can't quite get our heads around. The fact that the E-Pace is heavier and it costs more to run than its larger F-Pace showroom stablemate. Still, that hasn't turned out to be the deal breaker we thought it might be going into this test. For one thing, the inherent efficiency of the Ingenium diesel engines that most buyers will choose compensates to some extent for the extra bulk. As for the handling dynamics, well, by and large, small SUVs aren't bought for driving thrills. Now, this one may not be the segment sports car that Jaguar promised us, but it is still more accomplished on twisty tarmac territory than most of its rivals. And it's a bit different in style and character too. Now, we may bemoan the fact that the E-Pace doesn't share its bigger stablemate's light aluminium underpinnings, but we're pleased that in other respects it's been differentiated as a separate model in its own right with its own distinct character. Now, we can understand why you might feel more of a sense of engagement with its design, both inside and out, than you might with an obvious rival. Plus, this car's a quiet, comfortable cruiser with a big boot and lots of scope for personalisation if funds permit. Now, the brand says that this car energises its segment. Well, we wouldn't disagree with that. Yes, if you judge as a Jaguar, there are questions to ask here. If, though, you analyse this model's merits as a compact SUV, you'll find there's lots to like.